I want to say this, and I'm going to say it just once.
This is today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. We're in the second hour of this live broadcast. It is Friday. Appreciate you guys coming along for the ride this week. It's been a powerful week. We've had some great segments, some great analysis. We'll continue right now, pivoting over to the Middle East. Now, I want to welcome onto the program a guest right now. He is a security analyst. You'll also be familiar with his work on Al Mayadeen TV, which is one of the, I think, up-and-coming premier media outlets in the Middle East, but now internationally. They've launched a fantastic English language website and more content coming. Ali Jezzini joining us on the live link right now from Lebanon. Ali, I appreciate you coming on TNT this week.
Thank you, and hello.
It's great to have you. It's great to have you. Now, we've been talking a lot about the developments in the region, especially regarding Israel, Gaza, and as things have drifted north now to the confrontation that is now unfolding between Hezbollah in South Lebanon and the Israeli military. I want to get your assessment of this first initially. A lot of people think that this is a convenient pivot for the Netanyahu regime that seems to have failed to meet any of its military objectives in Gaza, and they just want to create distance from that, open up a new front. There's other people that think that they want to draw the United States into a wider conflict, and this is how they want to survive. I'm sure you've got a lot of different views on what's going on, but I'd just like to give an opening summary here of where you think things are at right now.
To start, thanks for hosting me on TNT Radio. And the main question here in Lebanon, the question that as a journalist you might be asked every day is, will there be a war or not in the coming maybe weeks or months? The situation actually has become tense in the last, let's say, weeks or maybe the last month or two on the blue line between northern Palestine and Lebanon. The resistance here, Hezbollah, has started using its newer arsenal of, top attack ATGMs, of drones that the Israelis have been unable to stop, which actually did hit targets inside northern Palestine that were crucial for the umbrella of the defense system, the air defense system for the Israelis. Radar, we're talking about radars, airborne radars, just like the big balloon that got popped a few weeks ago. We're talking about also some components of the Iron Dome systems. So it's a cumulative effect that each strike actually makes it more easier for the following strikes to just pass the air defense systems. Some of them were intercepted, but some of them are not. The pressure on the, let's say, the Israeli government has increased a lot there to actually take action in Lebanon. The main bane of the U.S. envoys here to Lebanon was to actually separate between the Lebanese front and let's call it the Gazan front. Most of the responses, if not all the responses that they have received in Lebanon, the Americans here in this case, have been negative. There will be no ceasefire. There will be no stopping for what we call it here as a support front for the Gaza until the genocide stops. The thing is, the main question that we can ask here, is this a bluff? So we can say that the Israelis are bluffing, or there is actual tangible material and maybe preparations, maybe like logistics works, reformations of divisions that might indicate there is an imminent attack. It is a hard question to answer, but I do not think that such an attack is as close as they like it to be, since for maybe at least not before the US elections. As in, I don't really think the Israelis can launch any attack if the decision was not made in Washington. The new main thing here is that Hochstein, the US envoy, has actually said that if we didn't come up to a solution in maybe 2-3 weeks, the US, he didn't say support, but will not oppose an Israeli action. He's using his terminology very carefully in that regard. But at the same time, if you want to speak like materials, the problem for the Israelis is not only technical material in the sense that its army is exhausted, they lack maybe some certain types of munition from fighting, 9 months in Gaza. They're even using anti-tank mines and explosive charges to blow up building blocks in Gaza because they don't want to use the expensive guidance kits and the airdropped munitions because they're saving them up, and not even like artillery shells. Multiple reports have talked about the Israelis actually saving up. I mean, on the platoon and the company level, soldiers have been talking like we're not using firepower as we were using before. So there's also a lot of disabled soldiers in the Israeli. The army is exhausted. And the army per se is a very small army. So once I think a few weeks ago, people were talking about the Israelis can mobilize 300,000 as they did at the beginning of the war on Gaza, but there is a lot of discrepancies in that number. The Israelis actually cannot just put 300,000 soldiers with rifles. Half of them are Air Force and Navy. And some estimates actually do put the numbers, as fighting soldiers, as grunts, of about maybe 40 to 50,000. We're talking just for scale. We're talking about the offensive in Lebanon in 2006. They employed about 10,000 foot soldiers. Now we're talking about 25. In Gaza, at its heights, there was about 30,000 soldiers. Not all of them were entering Gaza. Some of them have been securing the perimeter or maybe protecting the flanks of the advancing forces, mostly reservists, while the regular army, which is composed of 9 brigades, I think 5 infantry and 4 armored, the regular one, were the ones doing the, let's say, the nutcracker job, or like the main fighting in Gaza. So there are multiple Israeli analysts, well-renowned analysts, like former Brigadier General Itzhak Brik. He was actually the head of division to receive the complaints of soldiers, the department to receive complaints of soldiers in Gaza. And he is actually renowned as kind of a prophetic figure within Israel, in the sense that he had, in multiple occasions in the summer, warned that we are heading to a certain situation like the October 7. He was mainly talking about an attack from Lebanon, but as if what he said has came true. So Israelis were actually mostly mocking him in before. Now he's kind of a prophetic figure, because what he did, what he anticipated came to be true. That guy exactly is saying that we're heading to a disaster. We need to expand the army. We don't actually have the troops to mount an offensive. So to sum it all up, what we can anticipate is mostly an exchange of fire, at most, I would say, because entering from a sober military standpoint, that is just too hard to enter with such a troop, with such a high risk of sustaining casualties. We're talking about, say, 25,000 soldiers. A casualty here in that regard is not only a dead soldier. We're talking about disabled, injured, maybe missing in action, which render you incapable of fighting, which means the same thing within the context of battle. So against an army, it's the same situation in Lebanon. Like Sayyid Nasrallah yesterday, day before, said we have more than 100,000 soldiers. Of course, not all of them are foot soldiers, but can 25,000 soldiers actually do the job? How many of them are trained? How many of them will be reservists? So the numbers don't add up. So I'm more leaning into either an exchange of fire, like a wider scale, or a bluff in that regard.
Yeah, I think probably Israel would want to test Hezbollah, and Hezbollah would like to probably do the same. So you could see a protracted chess match. But in 2006, Israel, basically leveled civilian areas in Beirut, hitting targets all over the country, hitting the airport. So that's what it was like back then. What do Lebanese people think now? Do they think that Israel will could they actually do the same, or is that type of targeting and that type of bombing ruled out this time by the Israelis? Because obviously they themselves are much more exposed on their side than ever before.
Yeah, exactly. That is the point. If something is, let's say, soothing the population here and making them more calm, is that the belief that the resistance here in Lebanon actually possesses capabilities to impose a certain respect for civilians or like civilian areas in general, such as hospitals, infrastructure, in that regard. Like, there is a total disbelief here in Lebanon with the international law, especially after the whole Gaza genocide thing. Okay, so it's still ongoing. Nobody actually believes. Like, there was a group of Lebanese people that tried to say, like, Hezbollah should resign his arms, like give arms to the Lebanese state, and just like we will just count on the international community to protect us in that regard. Actual statistics and polls do show that such opinions are marginal at the moment after seeing what happened in Gaza, and that opinion, let's say, is shared by many Arabs at the moment. The thing is, the Israelis, after, let's say, the reform, I don't know if you read about the Dahi doctrine. The thing is, they have reformed the army after the 2011 and 12, and they normalized targeting the civilian infrastructure of, let's call it, the adversary or the enemy. So that's the thing. That's the contradiction, because they say usually we're in a counterinsurgency. They don't even have the respect to call their foes like armies or regular foes. No, we're just a counterterrorism or counterinsurgency. But all the schools of the counterinsurgency in the world do agree on the fact that civilian population should not be targeted, but instead, no, you should try to make it closer to you, just at least make it less hostile as possible. While the Israelis, since they have developed the Dahi doctrine, no, they said no, we should just stack numbers on civilians in that regard to exert psychological pressure on the enemy. And that has been exacerbated by the usage of AI and the new legislation. It's not legislation now, but the new regulations they have put on their soldiers, as if if we kill 20 civilians for each resistance operative, it's okay. If we kill 100 civilians for each resistance leader or officer, that is okay. That they just say it, and then there was reports, 972 report that was published in Israeli media. There are multiple programs like the Lavender, Where's Daddy, and so on and so forth. So there is, the only way for the Israelis in that regard to win is to actually not only target the combatants in that in a certain combat area, but actually to target the civilian administrations, to target the elite of the society. Doctors, how many doctors have been killed? Lawyers, even let's say professors, university professors, mayors, police chiefs. So to collapse the civil administration in an area, that is a scary thing. No one in the world does such a thing. This is something exceptional, and they're trying to normalize it now, by pushing also the narrative that this is the usage of AI. So this is the only way you can use AI. And by selling such programs, maybe in the future, to other people in the world, that is the danger. That could be normalized in the sense that what is happening in Gaza should become the norm. So instead of appealing the international law, they're trying to bend it for their favor and to change the whole international law for the whole world, the whole humanitarian world, because the Israelis know that they can't survive but by committing genocide. So we shouldn't abide by international law. No, everyone should commit genocide in that regard. That's just so scary. The only thing that could stop them from doing that is the deterrence.
Yeah, and also that's been reflected in, we see a lot of statements on, U.S. media, Western media. The talking point is, well, collateral damage, this happens. Look at World War II, 2 million, RFK Jr., Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said 2 million Germans had to die to defeat the Nazis, basically comparing this to the situation in Gaza, saying that, well, more Palestinians need to die to defeat Hamas. That's basically the takeaway point. So in the way they're normalizing massive collateral damage to achieve military objectives, exactly as you said. And this is coming into mainstream. It's not being challenged, Ali. That's probably the most shocking part about it. Is I don't see the outrage, maybe from some of us in the independent sphere, and some of the better commentators like yourself and other outlets have talked about this in the Middle East, maybe, but overall, nothing. There's no pushback. So I think you're absolutely correct in that assessment. That is actually very worrying for us. But what should be worrying for Israel is that Hassan Nasrallah in his previous speeches said, if you hit our airport, we're going to hit your airport. If you hit our civilians, we haven't before, but now we will reconsider our doctrine and we will reciprocate and hit possibly civilians in Israel. So Israel's never faced taking major losses inside of their, their enclave, militarily or civilian infrastructure. They've never had to face this. Now it's a problem. So I think that's a major change in the security calculus in this conversation. But I don't think they want to admit this publicly. What do you think?
It's that the Israelis are hanging now by a thread, as you have pointed out now, in the sense they have never experienced such a situation. So I read between their comments, either on social media, on Telegram, on X, and I try to translate it. The thing is, most of the people are baffled, and there is a lot of comments such as, "We do believe Nasrallah more than our army." They're mocking the spokesman of their army each and every day after a strike. Let's say like. The spokesman says, "We intercepted the drone," and then like the resistance shows a video that shows like, no, the actual drone has arrived and we have hit like 1, 2, 3, 4. So the thing is, there is a certain sense of exceptionalism. The Zionist idea of establishing a colonialist regime that is based on the exceptionalism. We are smarter than everyone. We are more efficient than everyone. And as a narcissistic idea in that regard, it will become to shock, the fact that we're not as capable as we seem. Like, it's not say, let's put an objective here, maybe to intercept the drone. A normal Israeli would say like, no, they would just come up with something. I mean, before the war. But now seeing that the drones are arriving and the Iranian missiles did arrive on 14th of April, it's creating a shock, an even worse situation than say a realistic person would have had. The thing is, the Israelis cannot say for their society that we're not as strong as we are, because the only way where we can stand and stay in a region hostile to you, I mean, as populace, many of the regimes have normalized, but the populace will always, I think, be hostile to the Israeli colonialists here. The only way to convince your population to stay is to convince them that you're 10 times stronger than the enemy, which have a certain repercussion, a cumulative effect of gaslighting yourself into believing that it's going to get better, we're going to win. But after you see failure after failure, people tend to resort to like maybe denial, projection at some later phases, but they would resort to panic at some point. So that's why if you want to read like the realistic assessments, they are being spread at the Israeli media, but not at a big scale. I'll give you an example. So yesterday, there is the head of the distribution of electricity, the company Noga in occupied Palestine, Israel. So he said that I don't think that we will able to withstand a strike, as the electric system won't be able to withstand a strike from Hezbollah in case there was an escalation. And then later on, he was bashed and attacked by every, Israeli commentator. Even the minister himself said, if they suffer from like a few hours of outages, if we suffer from a few hours of outages, the Lebanese will suffer from months of outages. So the fun part is like most of the comments, I literally read this comment. Most of the Israeli comments were just mocking him on social media. And you see, other commentators have said, no, if somebody knows in the in Israel what's actual situation of the grid, it's this guy. So why are not they being realistic, not to not spread panic? Because say, unlike, let's compare it to an ongoing conflict here, Ukraine, they lack the depth, the strategic depth. So if the Russians say like hit the power stations or the power distribution stations, the Ukrainians do actually have the depths maybe to move stuff, to hide stuff, and to, like, since the Russians are not here at the gates, I mean, as a land force, we can always fix stuff. But since the Israelis are a foreign, let's say, society, an alien society to the region, and they lack this strategic depth, like everything there, vital, can be hit with the most cheap munition possible and can be overwhelmed on multiple fronts. They really need like starting to spread panic within the populace would just make everything collapse in a domino effect. So they need that. They can't just tell them, okay, we're gonna be defeated or we're gonna suffer heavy casualties. The thing is, the last thing I want to say is that even the chief of staff of the Israeli forces actually complained about this multiple times. Is that because the public is pushing the forces to actually act in a certain way, not really understanding materially the repercussions of such a war. Like, it's not going to be only at the border or the blue line. No, like, you will personally suffer a ballistic missile strike. I mean, maybe at a base next to you, or you will suffer from the lack of services and water, and what you're going to do about it. Adding to that, if that happens, they are really scared of, also that's repeated so much, of the Arabs seeing. Like, it is written in every piece of media, we should not let the Arabs see that we are weak. It's like sharks smelling blood. So they have the potential, any disaster has the potential to become a domino, have a domino effect to collapse the whole thing. That's why they have to be bombastic about, their capabilities and threats and stuff.
So, yeah, because if the Israelis say, well, we're going to hit the Lebanese power electrical infrastructure and cause blackout, it's not going to create much of a panic or stress in Lebanon, is it? Because not having electricity is part of daily Lebanese life. So, but the reality is it's not difficult to work out where the weak points are. In fact, Hezbollah released a video of a drone overflight over Israeli territory this past week, a long video with high definition footage of all of their infrastructure, military and otherwise, so they know where everything is and they can hit it. They have the precision missile guidance systems and munitions and so forth that can do that. They haven't always had that, though, and that's the whole point, Ali, is that things have changed and technology has changed, capabilities have changed, advances in telemetry, advances in guidance, in intelligence gathering has changed. And once that's changed, then the old rules don't apply. And we've seen the old rules have dominated the last 70 years. And so we're seeing a revolution in military affairs happen. I don't think the media, the U.S. foreign policy establishment, the Israeli society, they haven't caught up to this change yet. And this is where they're really, I think, handicapped, because the propaganda within Israeli society, and Israelis tell me this, it's the most propagandized society in the world. They're completely insulated from a lot of the things that most of us are talking about outside of Israel, which is quite extraordinary, but it's true. So that's dangerous, actually. That puts them at a huge disadvantage right now, because they can't mobilize politically or militarily in a correct way. This could be really dangerous for them. But they're not realizing it yet. So this is how nations fall throughout history. This is how empires fall. So I think we're seeing a major game-changing situation here. Now, we're going to take a break, Ali, but if you stay with us, we have a clip from Hassan Nasrallah's recent speech where he sends a very clear message to the government of Cyprus. Again, this is a major game changer, the likes of which we have never seen before. We really need to unpack this. So I want to share that with you after the break. I'm here with Ali Jezzini, military analyst from the Middle East. We'll talk about this and the situation that's unfolding. The EU has been touched by the situation in the Middle East now, and how are they going to react? A little tremor, a tectonic shift happened this week. Nasrallah's speech, which draws the highest ratings really of any political event in the Middle East, and for good reason. He said something that I think really rocked the West and Israel when he drew Cyprus into the conversation. We're going to play this clip now. I want to get your reaction and also how you're interpreting what has been said here. Let's roll this clip.
يجب أن تحذر الحكومة القبرصية أن فتح المطارات والقواعد القبرصية للعدو الإسرائيلي لاستهداف لبنان يعني أن الحكومة القبرصية أصبحت جزءا من الحرب وستتعاطى معها المقاومة على أنها جزء من الحرب.
Well, I think the message is pretty clear there. Your response to this, what did you make of this, Ali?
Well, working today, maybe reading through the Western news, let's say I think the speech has been misinterpreted. Of course, most of the times on purpose. So it has been described as a threat. I don't see it as a threat in any way. It is a warning, maybe at the max, which is very compatible, I think, with international law in that regard. He's just stating the obvious. If you give your facilities, either civilian or military, to an attacking force that is attacking my country, you are party of that war. This is the most of the basic international law. I'm talking about codified law and let's say like the UN laws in general. So the thing is, it's not based on nothing. He just didn't just wake up this morning and said like, okay, we're gonna like speak something about Cyprus. The Israelis since 2022 have actually conducted multiple drills inside Cyprus with the proclaimed aim of attacking Lebanon. And the British and the Americans have been using Cyprus and Cyprus's airport. I'm talking about the two bases here, Akrotiri and Dikiria, the British bases, the British sovereign territory bases, and within Cyprus, to bomb Syria, to make to also like do reconnaissance sorties over Gaza, which also makes them a participant in this genocide. This is just basic knowledge. They have also declassified UK have reported that 60 planes, we're talking about the Galaxy and the Atlas, we're talking about big shipping planes, transport planes that have went to occupied Palestine, to the Israelis since the beginning of the war. What are they transporting? We don't know. They don't disclose it. They also put a ban on the media discussing the involvement of the SAS in any operations in Gaza. So what I'm saying here is that the let's say the warning to Cyprus in that regard, and also in that case, the US, the UK, and other parties that should think about giving their facilities to Israelis to strike Lebanon, is based on let's say previous events that compound this into a solid case of self-defense. I do not see anything as, let's say, an aggression or any kind of threat towards Cyprus. I think that we have, in Lebanon, we have had always like a friendly relationship with Cyprus, but that will probably end if they give willingly or not. So they might say that we were threatened or we were pressured by the US. It doesn't matter. You are party of the war if you give your airports to the Israelis. And that is basically due to the fact that, as you have previously said, the development of munition into cheap munition and the capabilities shown in April 14 to hit the Israeli systems and, let's say, airports, the Nevatim and Ramon bases, with Iranian missiles, only a volley. We're talking about a volley that have exhausted $2-3 billion of interceptors, maybe 20% of the whole arsenal of Israeli interceptors. So if we're talking about an expanded war, that is my personal opinion. It's going to be very hard to imagine the Israeli military airport functioning the same way, at least they're functioning normally. So they even might not have, let's say, air supremacy. And that also in that regard, if the US decides to send an aircraft carrier, what would that make it? And I know that this is just the thing is, it makes it so funny, as if I watch Western media and they are talking about it as, you know, Hezbollah is threatening, you know, the US will send forces, Hezbollah is threatening US forces, but you're invading us. It's just kind of funny and sad at the same moment. So, of course, it is a game changer, as it is the first time I think Hezbollah has commented into let's say, a foreign area of its usual sphere of action, which means the Arab and Islamic region and Palestine, Lebanon in general. But I think, and on a personal level, I think it was a necessary warning to actually put some cost and heighten the costs on any attempts to use such facility. Because imagine if a war starts and no one had discussed the issue, some people in Cyprus maybe say like, we'll get a bailout here, we'll get some money here, we'll get here and there, and like, let's just use it. They're not going to do that. So if you think about it, no, it's actually for the better of the Cypriot people. Like to put it in that perspective, and like the Cypriot officials went on to said like, no, this is not going to happen. We're not going to give any facilities. We're interested in peace and with mediating with other parties. So it's for the better of everyone. I think that speech was at that exact point.
The other thing people don't realize is Cyprus is the point where the European Union meets the Middle East. It's not very far away. If you take off from Beirut Airport in 10 minutes, or as soon as you achieve altitude, you can see Cyprus. It's that close.
150 miles.
Yeah, it's literally a stone's throw geographically from Lebanon. So now you have the EU is in the frame. And it wasn't in the frame for the very reason, which, Ali, you just said, which is that before Hezbollah and South Lebanon did not have the ability to reach out and touch Cyprus or to inflict any deterrence or cost on any military activity. And by the way, signals intelligence, satellite link-ups, reconnaissance, all that sort of data gathering happens there with the Americans and the British. The Israelis go there to do training for, ground invasion drills and so forth. They send their troops there. So there's a lot of things going on in Cyprus between America, Israel, and Britain, and other countries too, NATO countries that use that as a way station. So all of a sudden, that's now been pulled into the conversation. That to me is incredible. And when Europe or NATO or anybody sees that they could basically incur a heavy cost and expose themselves militarily, geopolitically, politically, then people start having a different attitude about what's happening in and around Israel. And so they're not going to be able to dismiss it as, because as you know, Hezbollah is regarded by the U.S. and its main allies as a terrorist organization, not a semi-state actor, not an actual militia, a self-defense organization protecting South Lebanon from occupation. They regard it as a terrorist organization. So therefore they don't need to address any of the military points or any of the geopolitical points or security issues. They just push it all aside and say it's Israel versus the terrorists. So, but that you can't have that conversation now because Cyprus has deployed emissary to Lebanon now, emergency discussions. This is incredible. This is upstaged Amos Hochstein and the Americans who were setting the agenda. They're no longer setting the agenda here. That's pretty incredible, isn't it, Ali?
Yeah, and the fact that because the U.S. thinks it administrates and governs the world. So let's put a counterexample in that regard. Even in peace, like say when Saudi Arabia and Iran normalized relations, the U.S. media, the U.S. officials were all worried. They didn't express it maybe like in a public way, but leaks were just talking about how they went crazy because other people are intervening in making peace. We're talking here, not about making war. So it's just, I think, pulling the carpet from under the U.S., the rug from under the U.S. feet in the Middle East in general. And also the U.S. is already feeling that it's been, let's say, its role have been limited more by Iran, the combination of Iran, China, and Russia in Syria. So yeah, it's making them even panic more. And the whole situation regarding that, it might escalate into a regional war. And you have multiple scenarios right now on the planet where you have like keep feeding the Ukrainian army and keep like providing it with weapons. You don't know how the situation in East Asia will develop. So it's just adding to the panic of the U.S. in general. If you ask me, like I would say, the U.S. if let's call it, if you tell the U.S. that it can bomb Lebanon without any repercussions and maybe kill 10,000 civilians, they just wouldn't care. The only thing that would, let's say, act as a deterrent for them to put a leash on Israel is the belief that this will escalate. And that is why Sayyid Nasrallah actually pointed out that this will be a war without limit and without any, let's say, any boundaries. So, and people actually, this is counterintuitive, but people think that, okay, he's threatening and this is an aggressive move. No, he's just raising the cost. So this is actually contributes even more to avoiding the escalation, in the sense that there is kind of, I see it a lot in the American and the Israeli discourse, this kind of exceptionalism when we say it versus when they say it. So the Americans can just come and threat and do whatever they want. They have the second largest base in the largest embassy in the world here in Lebanon. Nobody knows what's under that embassy, and nobody can say anything. Just like impose diktats. I think it's going to be very hard for the US to understand that the age of diktats is over. They're in for a big shock if it's not. I really don't hope for a big war, let's say a wide regional war. No one knows actually who will win this war, but what is actually guaranteed here is that the US will lose its race of hegemony with China for the world here. So that is what also the US wants to avoid. It wants to achieve its goal, but it wants to avoid the war. But at the same time, it's not about being dragged. The US exactly knows that Benjamin Netanyahu wants to drag it into a war. The US is not a child. They know exactly that, but they're letting him. So if you don't take action as the US to put a leash on him, you're just as complicit. And if you also Israel starts a war and it gets beaten down and almost at risk, and then you enter the discussion, it doesn't matter what you have already did to Benjamin Netanyahu. You did not stop the war. You're a party now. So that is the real risk here. It's not about words. It's about actions and putting restraints on Israel here.
The other thing that the U.S. is risking, which I don't think it's in their interest, and this might actually really be one of their saving graces in this, if it does escalate and this does happen, they have to basically, they're gambling their footprint in the entire region, all of these embassies, all of these bases. So they have to make a calculation at that point, because once they are evicted from Lebanon, Iraq, these other countries, they can't come back. And not for a long time. So they have to calculate this. What is that going to cost them to lose diplomatic and military presence in the entire region? Because that's exactly what they're risking. And I don't think Washington wants to make that risk. So that leads us back to Israel. Then there has to be a change in the Israeli side that's going to be imposed somehow, or a different shift attacked in their strategy or relationship with Israel. That's what I'm hoping for. Again, I'm with you. Nobody wants to see a wider war for sure, because there's too many things that the United States can lose. I'm hoping this is going to be their self-interest is going to be a potential saving factor to avoid the worst possible outcome. Your thoughts?
So the thing is, the U.S. is pretty much here in let's call it in a bottle, like a scorpion in a bottle, some kind of two scorpions. It really has a small margin of action, because it actually it realizes that Israelis and Israel in general is the unsinkable aircraft carrier. It's the ship that the Americans use to actually project and impose power in the region. So from a strategic standpoint, if they want to continue to actually dominate the region in their Roman style, let's say expansionist militaristic way, they will always have to have, a base. But that is the thing. The US, since it has came to the region, it came as hostile. There is something about the Americans always asking why the Middle Easterners and Muslims hate us. But just put yourself in their shoes. They have never seen anything but war, death, and destruction from the US. And people are also complaining now why they like the Chinese and the Russians more. It's because, if you come in peace, you want to trade, you just trade with you, just normal people like you. So the thing is, the Israelis also here, let's go back to the first subject. The Americans can't stop armed shipments from their perspective, because that will weaken the Israelis into collapsing. They can't. It's just like a spoiled child in that regard. If you stop arms, no, I'm going to just be angry and attack Lebanon. And then you'd have to actually bail him out with US troops, US taxpayers' money and equipment and the whole thing. But at the same time, how can they pressure? You see, I don't know, you saw the debacle between Biden and Netanyahu with the whole thing. You didn't give us arms. And then the Biden administration said, this is just out of this world, what you're saying. The thing is, Biden administration keeps talking about the two-state solution, but there is literally no two-state solution. The whole Israeli society is aimed at controlling the whole of historic Palestine. They don't want a one-state solution. They don't want a two-state solution. They just want the whole cake. I think what's out of this world is that actual realization of, and the speech of the Biden administration in general, that the Israeli society can still be pushed to a two-state solution. The Israeli society is pretty much divided to a point that it will cause a civil war inside it if a certain, let's say, two-state solution has been imposed. And there is this kind of, let's call it a big lie that has been said, the Americans have been telling that the U.S. administration have been telling the American people regarding that, as if Lapid or Benny Gantz or the other are like the leftists that want peace, or the doves that want the two-state solution. Nobody wants the two-state solution. So what are you going to do now? It just doesn't make any sense. You're just gonna walk with the Israeli society that has always shifted more to the right within a certain situation that will put you against the whole region. So that the choices between the Americans here is either impose a two-state solution or a one-state solution, or whatever solution that would avoid the deaths of people but would collapse its unsinkable aircraft or base in the region and make it more into the democratic society, but they don't care. Or either continue to support Israel, just like give them the whole flywheel, you know, they know better, and just being dragged into a region and then, you know, getting into another quagmire in the Middle East without any end, any goal, you know, any prospect. So what is going to be their choice? Like, unfortunately, it doesn't seem that they're going to take any tangible, solid action to put a leash on the Israelis because they're too fragile. The Israelis are too fragile to actually be stopped now, because the moment you impose something, the extremists are going to make a coup. That's my expectations. So they're in a little bit of a hard situation, between a rock and a hard place, the U.S. administration now.
And how about Hezbollah? Have their efforts helped to increase their support in Lebanon, in the region of recent?
Yeah, of course. So the polls actually indicate, and the statistics, that the resistance in Lebanon has the support of much of the Lebanese people in that regard, as in supporting Gaza and preventing Israeli attacks on Lebanon, as I said in the beginning of this session. So the main issue here is that the Lebanese people actually see what's happening in Gaza and what's the limitations of the so-called international law and law-based order, the whole situation. While on the other hand, if you follow social media, you see that the Lebanese resistance, Hezbollah, has an increased popularity in many contexts of the Arab region. Since Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the whole Gulf states have went into try to tarnish the Lebanese resistance, as in putting the whole context of the war in Syria that happened as in a sectarian war. So let's say what I'm seeing on social media in general, and from talking to people that had let's say opinions against the resistance and before the war, no, a lot of people had changed. And I'm very hopeful actually that this schism that has caused us so much pain and so much destruction is actually starting to heal because of that.
No, there's been definitely a change, I think, in the political conversations reflected by what's happening on the military theater. It always happens this way, by the way, in history. So it's certainly an interesting development. Ali Jezzini, military and also political analyst from the Middle East, Al Mayadeen TV. You can see him there and on other outlets. Thank you so much for coming on TNT this week.
Thank you so much for hosting me. Thank you.
Our pleasure. Great discussion, ladies and gentlemen. Also, Benjamin Rubenstein in the first hour. It's been a fantastic program. Appreciate you guys coming along for the ride this week. Great TNT chat, community participation. Love you guys. We'll see you on Monday, same time, same place, for another powerful weekend. Take care. Have a great weekend. All the best. Stay here. Top there. News headlines coming up. State of the Nation up next on TNT. Patrick